I rise to support the legislation today. I am also planning to speak on the condolence motion later on in this place, so I won't go into a lot of detail about my feelings about the tragic and terrorist event which occurred at Bondi, other than to say that I will talk about that some more later on, and obviously my heart goes out to all those who've been affected, and I will elaborate on that later on. I was at the event last night as well, and it was a very emotional event, one that I think provided a great indication of the sort of hope about human kindness that we can get from those acts of cruelty that we saw. But I want to focus in this contribution briefly on the legislation that we have before us today. There's two elements of it, as we've heard. There is the elements around the use of slogans which spread hate. There is the elements of it around gatherings. There is the elements of it around the firearms. And I just heard the member for Barwon speaking about the firearms. And there's a number of things, and I do represent a regional electorate. I represent Monero. I gather we have about 12,000 registered firearms owners or registered licensed owners in the electorate, and I have met many of them over the years, and I speak to many, and I know many of those owners are people who are active in a range of parts of our community. So I'm hearing from a number of them about their need for some more explanation of how this is going to be work. I'm obviously seeing some of the form emails that some of the organisations have got going. They're probably not as constructive as some of the more thoughtful ones that I've received from people that have actually talked to me about their specific circumstances and what they feel, how they feel that they'd like to have clarification around some elements of this. I want to address a couple of things in it first, though. In the emails, and I haven't read all the emails yet, but I've read a lot of the emails, and I've spoken to a couple of people. I've read the emails from people who've told me about particularly circumstances where they cross over. So they're a farmer as well as being a target shooter, and the need for the numbers of weapons to be able to cope with that. Something which I have spoken to the Minister about quite extensively. But something that almost no one has disagreed with is the need to do more to ensure that, in fact it was reflected in some of the comments opposite as well, the need to do more to make sure that when we consider giving someone a licence that we are matching up intelligence information that's available, that we are resourcing the firearms registry properly so that they can ensure that we are making adequate checks on people. And even though it's annoying, and I know that people are annoyed about potentially having to renew every 2 years, I'm not actually hearing that much vehement opposition to that either, as long as the firearms registry is resourced appropriately to make sure that renewals happen quickly and that people don't lose their access to their weapons when that happens, if they're not processed in time. So I think that's positive that that those sorts are out there. And I did hear a couple of members opposite who were talking today who may not have recognised, I think, that who talked about failure. I suppose the failure that they see, and let's wait till we see a bit more investigation on this. But from the outside, it does look like you can ask legitimately questions about why the firearms registry wasn't aware that someone who lived in the household as the shooter's. The licensed shooter in that household wasn't flagged, and why a licence was granted. And the Minister has outlined in her speech and in the discussions that I've had with her exactly how some of the changes will actually deal with this. And that's partly about the way that the appeals are now to be dealt with. There has been a difficulty, as I understand it in the past, with sharing of intelligence information, where that information might then become publicly available. And that's something which you obviously need to ensure that there is a smooth line for intelligence sharing when it comes to really important information about who might be applying for a gun licence. And that's something which this legislation is doing. So I am strongly of the view that the changes that are being made on licensing and enabling that intelligence sharing with some availability of external appeal in some circumstances is the best way to go in what is a really difficult situation where we are. And I know from correspondence that I get that people share the view that the member for Barwon has had, that they're being blamed for what happened at Bondi. That is absolutely not the case. But what there is out there is a call from many, many people in New South Wales, including some other people who've corresponded with me in my office, that they do want to see action to reduce the number of guns overall, and they do want to see action to stop people who aren't actually legitimate hunters and recreational shooters. They want to make sure that they are not having weapons. So, that's a tough balance. And as I've said to a couple of people who corresponded with me, one of the tough things about being in government is you're often making laws for the people who don't do the right thing, not for the law-abiding citizens across the rest of the state. And that's one of those unfortunate realities of government. Now, when it comes to numbers, there is a number of things which need to be worked through in terms of, for instance, the case I mentioned before, a farmer who obviously has a variety of weapons for control of feral pests on the property, as well as for property, but also is a target shooter, and currently has 16 guns. This is what somebody who's corresponded with me. There is scope in what the Minister is talking about here for commissioner exemptions, and I do urge the gun-owning community to bear with us while we talk through how those things might work in a way which is practical, to make sure that there is availability of exemptions that take into account specific cases, that make sure that somebody who is a landholder, not just a designated farmer, who undertakes that pest management activity, also has access to those limits and the number of weapons. Can I ask for a short extension?
The question is that the member be given an extension of 5 minutes. All that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it.
I have broken one of my own rules here. I always say anyone who stands up and says they're going to make a brief contribution always ends up asking for an extension. And I always go, oh. But anyway, I did want to just finish talking about some of the issues that have been raised with me. I've certainly had raised with me cases around whether all farmers are going to need to have be members of clubs, and I have raised that with the Minister to look at in the regulations. The cases of people who do cross over with different uses is really the main one that I've had raised with me by a lot of people, and also how people who are genuinely doing feral pest control, who may be recreational users but don't own a property themselves, can have their specific cases dealt with as well. I do think that there is room here to deal with a number of the aspects that people are raising with me in their correspondence. We won't make everybody happy. There is going to be a reduction in the number of guns in the community, and I think that's actually what the community expects to see. There is going to be an increase in the scrutiny on licensees, and again, I think that's what the community expects to see. And we need to work through that and make sure that we do this in a way which does recognise that rural and regional communities have quite different needs. We have in the Monero electorate a massive feral pest animal problem. Our farmers in our area are dealing with overwhelming numbers of deer, many of which were unfortunately quite deliberately allowed to be freed and roam, and weren't subject to feral pest controls for many years when they should have been. But they're now causing a huge amount of damage to people's property in Monero, knocking over fences, competing for pasture, destroying trees, a range of things. We also have a massive pig problem in the area, as well as the old problems of rabbits and foxes. So I absolutely recognise the very legitimate need for landholders in our region to have appropriate guns. I absolutely recognise that animal welfare is not helped by shooting an animal with an inappropriate weapon or an inappropriate type of ammunition. And that's something which needs to be considered as we go through all of this as well. But we are taking quick action. I recognise that for some people that action is too fast and that they want to see a lot more consultation, but we are taking quick action because we've had an incredibly tragic event, something which is unprecedented in Australian history, and we need to act now as a government to make sure that we don't end up as a country where this stops being a massive shock. This should be it. And we need to make sure that we all do our part right across every part of society, and that means that some people will feel that they're being asked to sacrifice something for the benefit of the rest of society. I'd ask in their correspondence over this that people just see this through till we have actually put the regulations in place, the arrangements in place and the resourcing to see how it goes, and work with us while we do that. And I have to say to them that I recognise, and I know that the organisations have got people sending me emails saying they'll never vote for me again. And that's their right to do that. But if I was here and swayed in the positions I took just on the basis of people not threatening not to vote for me, then there wouldn't be a point in being politics. You're here to try and do the right thing as you go through this business, and that's what I'll try to do in my consideration of the way that this process is implemented.